As I am now fast approaching 30, I've begun to reflect on the games past which formed my gaming opinions. When I think about RPGs that I grew up with, the earliest RPG I can remember playing is KOTOR 1 and 2, and then Final Fantasy X, eventually getting into World of Warcraft and MMOs in general. Soon after that, it was Mass Effect and Fallout 3. I have vague memories of playing Neverwinter Nights, and maybe even owning a copy of Icewind Dale that I never played. But when I think hard enough about it, I realize that my RPG background doesn't actually go that far back at all. Throughout most of my 20s, I would go back and try to play the older classics that are considered pioneers, but more often than not, giving up on them rather quickly. One day, something changed in me though, and that gene was mostly perished. I guess I just wanted to learn more about the games that influenced so greatly some of my favorites. I was never really good at role-playing characters though, which I believe can be attributed to the kinds of RPGs that I was playing. In KOTOR 1, you are playing as an established character with a history and previous relationships, but with the amnesiac angle, it can easily be construed that you are just another nameless face. In Fallout 3 and Mass Effect, you actually were a nobody with very little history that would affect the choices you, the player, would choose. I got into a nasty habit of only role-playing as myself, or worse yet, due to BioWare's general design decisions, only roleplay as a good guy or a bad guy, without really considering what I feel the player character would choose. Fast forward to 2015's The Witcher 3, a game that I bounced off several times before falling in love with and eventually completing every damn near quest in the game. The problem I had was, I didn't like or want to be Geralt. I couldn't insert myself into his shoes and therefore couldn't relate to the character or his journey. It took some time, but after 3 times of getting to the Bloody Baron and quitting, the fourth time, it finally clicked. I wasn't supposed to see myself as Geralt. I was meant to step into his shoes and ask myself how I'd fill them. Who would be saved and who would be spared would be up to fate and me, not Geralt. Fast forward another couple of years to 2019's Disco Elysium, which, while I did beat it, I only really again achieved role-playing as myself. Would I have said some of the things I said, or made the choices I made if I fully immersed myself in the protagonist's situation? This is a mistake I didn't want to make while playing Planescape Torment for the first time. Hello everybody, my name is Stone Skeleton, and this is my review of Planescape Torment. Planescape Torment is a 1998 tabletop-style role-playing game that has been heralded as a classic for almost 2 decades now. Set in the Dungeons & Dragons now discontinued Planescape setting, you play as an amnesiac zombie man with memento-style tattoos all over your body with instructions. The main character, the Nameless One, is also an immortal. How long for, how, and why are all unknowns to you. This is the mystery you must set out to uncover. Unlike a lot of other D&D games of the time though, combat is not the primary focus of this game. The primary verb of Planescape Torment is reading. This is a low-fidelity game, and rarely are actions and details shown to the player. Rather, they are described to the player. Planescape puts heavy emphasis on telling a human, relatable story on one of the most fantastical settings imaginable. The city of Sigil, which is where most of the game will take place, is a crossroads town in the center of all of the planes of alignment. There are portals all throughout the city, each requiring its own method of unlocking, some requiring a literal key and some requiring something otherwise. The planes beyond Sigil are literal representations of the 9 alignments of the Dungeons & Dragons universe, which I'll put up a little graph here for you. Bam. Graph. At first I thought this was a rather dry idea. As a non-D&D player, I struggled to imagine how these literal manifestations of an alignment could be interesting. I imagined something like more akin to 2000's BioWare, where I'd have to go to 3 planets, and then eventually move on to railroaded and endgame. Visiting the world of lawful good didn't sound that interesting. If everyone on the plane is lawful good, what intrigue could really be found there? Instead, the game leans into making Sigil a character itself. As it is a crossroads town, it is both home to some and highway truck stop to others. Unlike a D&D game based in whatever the equivalent to Earth is, in Sigil you'll be dealing with demons, witches, and the dead, and in a more casual setting, where not everything necessarily needs to end in bloodshed. Order in Sigil is maintained by a figure known as the Lady of Pain. The lady acts as an unseen guardian of Sigil. She doesn't ask too much of people residing in Sigil, and her rules are pretty simple. 1. Don't worship me. 2. Don't cause trouble. 3. Don't attack her Dubais, her helpers. I probably butchered that. Those that break these laws will end up in a situation that some may consider worse than death. With these laws of absolutes, Sigil is a strangely democratic place. The melting pot of alignment breeds a civility in the residents, and yet also a dirty underhandedness to the way that they treat each other. With enough nuisance, it becomes easy to draw the lady's ire, so some of the more malicious residents may resort to acting in shadow. All in all, it's super interesting to see how the different factions, races, and alignments interact. The game and its lore go deeper than most will get to read in a single playthrough, but when the writing is this good, too much is much better than too little. From the moment you escape the tutorial section in the mortuary, Sigil is a place that is absolutely begging to be explored, and it's equally a joy to do so. From a gameplay perspective, Planescape doesn't have a great deal of it in the conventional sense. The controls are simple, and the game can almost be entirely played with a mouse, which nicely complements the before-bedtime appeal that this game might have to some. For the most part, you will be mostly bouncing just back and forth between areas, helping NPCs while also trying to come across the information about that pesky amnesia you are suffering from. You will, over the course of the game, build up a party who shall aid you in your quest of identity. Morte is a talking, floating, disembodied skull who you will find next to you when you wake up at the beginning of the game, and in the spirit of putting your best foot forward, which it doesn't have, it is also the most interesting of your potential party members. This isn't to say the others are worse, but there is a drop in quality with each new party member you discover. I feel this could be because of a couple of things, but namely personal preference, and that some of the parties are basically secrets that take a fair bit of exploring and playing around to uncover. All I know is that I'd go to hell and back for my boys Morte and Dakan. By completing quests and discovering things in the world, your character, the Nameless One, will start to recover his memories. Perhaps an item will remind him of a past life, or a subject of a conversation spur out a memory of a long-lost spell forgotten years ago. This style of discovery-based gameplay makes Planescape feel more like an adventure or a detective game than the myriad of RPGs that would follow it. Quests can range often from making the player feel quite clever to all but requiring a guide. I used a guide a couple times in my playthrough. More often than not, I'd regret it, as the answer was usually right under my nose, but after a certain point I'm blinded by frustration to even see the solution. In my opinion, there is no shame in using a guide when you get stuck. The story and fiction is far too good to let yourself get hung up on some obtuse puzzle. On to combat, and you've probably heard. It's bad, and by far the worst part of this game. I've saved it for around the end because it's not even fun to talk about, let alone experience firsthand. In Planescape, there are almost always more than one way out of a situation, and one of those ways will usually allow you to escape situations without violence. There are 3 or so occasions where your only choice is to fight, and these occasions suck. But they take up a very small portion of your actual playing time, and it's not worth thinking about. Buy lots of health potions, save often, and if you have to, just cheat to get through it. Most combat encounters can be completely avoided by running past enemies, and in a stroke of genius damage control that is also law-abiding, the Nameless One is immortal. All death means to the player is resetting back to where you entered the screen, and you can just try again. This is a huge boon for the game, removing so much of the frustration of combat, and it helps the game from grinding to a halt in tough combat situations. I feel pretty secure in saying that not much is lost by thinking of the game's combat as a necessary evil of the time. I imagine it would have been quite difficult to sell a Dungeons & Dragons game without combat, considering it was the style of the time. The game also doesn't really have too much in the way of puzzles either, so to reiterate my previous warning, this game is mostly reading. I did manage to glean some moments of enjoyment out of the combat towards the end of the game, which is funnily enough the place with the highest concentration of combat. I was playing my character as a mage and finally started getting some high level spells, which were not only greatly effective, but come with a neat little mini cutscene to go with them. For some reason, spamming these spells with my mage gave me a real power fantasy feeling. The game never strikes a good difficulty balance, things being either far too hard or far too easy. This is exacerbated by the fact that party members can only be given one command at a time, and after said task is completed, for example an enemy dying or a spell is cast, you must give that party member another order or they'll just stand there. Characters are also pretty difficult to individually select, so misclicks are something that are basically guaranteed. Something that also hurts the combat is there isn't much in the way of equipable items. You do come across some weapons and armor in your journey, but these moments are rare, and if you're anything like me, forgot to pick up the character's inventory after resurrecting them if they died in combat. It just doesn't feel like there's actually much you can do to overcome the difficult combat situations without pretending the game is just a football simulator, just run past everything. I found the graphics of Planescape to be surprisingly pleasant, considering the game is over 20 years old. Buildings are distinct and characters clear. The art style adds to the feeling of Sigil being a crossroads, adding subtle layers of spaghetti western aesthetic underneath it all. It feels grounded and believable. Nothing about the graphic style goes beyond good and functional for me, but I am looking at it with 2023 eyes. I did like some of the latest spell effects like I said, but my enjoyment may have been more derived from finally being able to crush enemies with my powerful mage spells. There isn't really a good way to discuss the game's story without spoiling it too much, and seeing as this video isn't going to be a retrospective, you're just going to have to take my and everybody else's word for it. It's good. The overarching mystery of who you are, the Nameless One, really is, will, for the most, end on a satisfactory note. You don't need to worry. This is a complete game with a complete conclusion that will not leave a bitter taste in your mouth. It's worth to stomach the sometimes awful but tolerable combat simply for that, but it's the side quests too where the writing really shines. Your adventure as the Nameless One will have you interacting with dozens of characters, many of which aren't related to the main plot whatsoever. They will all have problems, and depending on how the player embodying the Nameless One will get different solutions. After all, if you woke up tomorrow with no memories of who you are or what you did in your past lives, what kind of person would you be? I'm really glad I took people's word and went to play this game. While it did feel like at times reading an absolute monster of a novel, it enraptured me more than any other piece of literary fiction and couldn't have been done in a novel. The Nameless One is probably now in my top 5 video game main characters. The combat sucks. I don't need to say it again, but I mean, it's fine. It's fine. At least most things you can just run straight past. Retrospective. Should I do one? Not too sure. Let me know, because it'll be a fun project to take on. Thanks everybody for watching. Does watching Lord of the Rings count as reading? Because I don't really feel like reading.